Oh, we've lost Danielle as well. Hi, everyone. We will just wait. Danielle Dobson. So welcome to the learning table today. Danielle Dobson. Oh, it's Michelle. Hi, Michelle. Danielle Dobson is joining us and has been here the whole time and has just dropped out, which she's having. There we go. There she is again. She's been having all sorts of issues because there is a lot of wind and rain going on in Melbourne, and Danielle's in Melbourne as well. Breaking the gender code, and I thought she sounded amazing, so we had a chat, and since then I have just been absolutely delighted to hear everything that I can about Danielle. She and I don't know everything, so I'm only going to do a little bit, Danielle, then you can jump in, but she is the most wonderful woman. She is a huge advocate for women. She's done a lot of research into female leaders, and used that. She interviewed, I think, over 50 women, and then used that information to write Breaking the Gender Code. She is all about all those unconscious bias and entrenched things that we don't necessarily even think of. Hi, Maureen. But that affect how women are getting into leadership roles. And I'm incredibly excited to have her. She lives in Wollongong. Oh no, that's right. So she's not in Melbourne at all. And I'm very, very excited to have her join us. So welcome, Danielle.
Thanks, Jules. Thanks so much for inviting me to be here, and I'm really excited to be at the learning table with you all. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm so glad that your phone at least works if the laptop's not. So we've had all sorts of issues, but here we are. Now, I suggest for all of you that you go up into the top right-hand corner where it says view and click on speaker. And that way you'll get to see Danielle's beautiful face. And if she records things, you'll get to see that full screen as well. So over to you, Danielle.
So thanks again, Jules, for having me here. And if things worked out differently, I was going to do things a little bit differently with the start of this with Zoom.
Yes, of course.
I'm on my phone, and it makes it a little bit harder. But it would be really great to understand, is it a little bit to help me with the next, 50 minutes or hour or the time that we have together, a little bit about why you're here today. So is it...
Oh, great idea.
Yeah. So is there, a word, a couple of words, a sentence, something that we can all share together that helps us to understand why we're here today? Why did we take an hour and a half out of our precious day to be here together? So it'd be really great if you could pop that in the chat. So why you're here today. It might be, I don't know, networking. It might be you seeing friends, socialising, learning new things, whatever it is. It would be great if you could pop that in the chat. And inspiration and connection. Excellent. Thanks, Maureen. That's lovely. Hearing you speak about the gender code, is it?
That was me.
Yeah, excellent. Hearing you speak about the gender code and understanding what it is, excellent. Great. So it's great. So understanding, why we're here is great. Very important subject. Excellent. Thanks, Carol.
Sorry, Danielle, I know that you've lost your screen, so you've lost your ability to share. Are you okay? Do you want us to ask you questions? I mean, it's whatever is easiest for you.
No, that's fine, because I have a PowerPoint, but I'm not tied to it. It was only, the PowerPoint was actually really extra to give a few visuals to understand a few sort of concepts, but really I'm totally fine to speak, without it. So
wonderful. What a professional woman you are. Look at that. So we can all watch and learn.
Well, yeah, before all this, I was speaking on stages, and you don't have the, you've got to rely on, memory and it's got to be part of your DNA. So I do have a few cheat sheets around me here, so I'll give it away.
Good. Okay, great.
And then another thing that would be really helpful is, before we launch in, is if you could let me know what you want to walk away with today. So is it a feeling? Is it learning something in particular? What kind of outcomes? Because if I know that, because I haven't spoken to you all beforehand, because typically I'll find out what the audience wants or needs, or So if you could help me by letting me know what sort of outcomes you want, what you want to do, think, feel afterwards, then I can tailor the next, the time we have together to make sure that we achieve that. So it might even just be something simple, understanding confidence, how to open up conversations, and actually said to learn about, understanding some of the issues, female leaders and some unconscious bias, confidence to move forward. Excellent. Thanks, Coco. And how to open up conversations with others that aren't here about this. Excellent. All righty. Great. So that gives me an idea. So in addition to that, I'm also going to speak to you about the story behind the book and the research right. And how it happened, the impact that it's having right now, and why it matters that we know about it, and then what we can do moving forward. And then we'll get time towards the end to think about some practical things that you can possibly take away with you today. And hopefully that will cover, conversations and confidence and things that Mia and Coco brought up, and understanding more about the gender code. So is everyone ready? And I'm sorry I can't see you all because of my phone, but I'm hoping that there's nods. I can see Jules, so that's good. So here we go. We'll launch in. So sitting in a cozy cabin on Lake Washington, Seattle, October 2017. I'm 2 days into a 3-day business intensive course with my coach, Pam. It's 9 a.m. and I feel like I've hit a brick wall because I am totally out of ideas of how to solve a problem that's been keeping me stuck for a while. You see, I didn't feel that I could be the parent that I wanted to be to my 3 boys, and at the same time achieve at the level of success I wanted to in my business without feeling like I was failing at both. And from my work as a wellness and executive coach for professional women, I knew I wasn't alone in this struggle, and that many women felt that tension between achieving at work and at home, but feeling like they were failing at everything. And also I noticed in my clients and everyone around me that it was leading to anxiety, exhaustion, and burnout. So it was a big question mark. And Pam, my coach, she could see that I was stuck, and she also knew, because she's so brilliant, that it was my beliefs that were holding me back. So she helped me get unstuck and move forward. And she asked me a couple of questions. She said, Danielle, what's behind that belief that you hold with so many other professional working mothers? What's really holding you all back, and what can you do about it? It was like, whoa, okay. So those questions just changed everything, because that became the birthplace of a market research project that would change my world and everything and everyone in it. So I rushed back from Seattle. And I was really excited. Like, okay, I love research. I love speaking to people like Jules, like interviewing people and finding out their stories. So I'm like, right, I can do this. So I got back and I started connecting with friends and colleagues in the business and corporate world. And that had been my home base for 14 years, where as a CPA, I covered everything from private practice to multinational global countries, and lived and worked in 5 different countries. And based on referrals from those people and a bit of stalking by me, I started interviewing women who are leading at work and also leading at home. And I wanted to understand how being a parent influenced their leadership style, and how being a leader influenced how they parented. So I wanted to know what was, rather than looking at 2 separate worlds, I wanted to know what was working well across all areas and what strengths they bring and build to both. So there were hundreds of conversations, and I formally recorded 52 of them. And this included a few men. And they work in senior roles across a range of industries, banking and finance, IT, engineering, government, hospitality, recruitment, not-for-profit, I think journalism, coaching, you name it, I covered it. So a big cross-section. And during these conversations, there were a few themes that were emerging, and I cover them more in my book. But in particular, I kept hearing observations and experiences around three key things. And the first one is that pretty much every woman that I spoke to, I discovered that they put a huge emphasis on setting everyone else around them up for success and human flourishing. But they didn't realise the extent of their positive impact. On the outside, they look like Wonder Women, performing at huge levels of productivity and achievement. But not one of them, not one, thought that they were worthy of the superhero title. They just thought the way they lived and operate is what they do. And it's what they and society expects of them. And they find it much easier to see brilliance in others than in themselves. So the second key theme was that everybody I spoke to said that becoming a parent fundamentally changed them. And that wasn't a surprise because I experienced that too, being a parent myself. But what was surprising was how much their contribution at work was positively impacted, and also their leadership style, how that improved for the better. And for many, the experiences of becoming a parent helped them further build other key skills and strengths like self-regulation, empathy, and self-awareness. And what's that? Emotional intelligence training 101. Organizations spend millions a year trying to teach this to people. And for everyone else as well, or pretty much everyone else, they further build or strengthen other key skills like adaptability, flexibility, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, critical skills needed in the workplace, leadership, and all areas of life right now. And then the third key thing was through these conversations, what kept coming up were stories, observations, experiences of gender disparity, pay inequality, discrimination and inappropriate treatment of women in the workplace, and how these disparities extended to the home life with unequal distribution of unpaid work. Now, this is well known and documented, and I experienced it myself, but I was curious to know, where did all this come from? I mean, how did we get here, these disparities and inequalities? And, the interesting thing is that we often don't notice what we're putting up with ourselves, those things that are beneath the surface that we can't quite put our finger on, but they're causing us some pain. Well, sometimes we do notice and we trust ourselves to push through it and know that we can deal with it, and often by trying to work harder and being more productive. There's a bit of pain management. We're trying to prove we can do it. But when you notice it happening to others and you see their suffering, it can trigger something deep inside you and you feel compelled to do something to ease their suffering. And that's what happened to me. Because the more that I listened, the more that I learned, and the more that I dug into it, the madder I became about the disparities and the power imbalances. And now I'm like, right, I really want to know what happened. How did we get here? And, all I knew is that I would stop at nothing to understand it and fix it. And so what started as a market research project back there in Seattle morphed into a mission. And because I knew that what I was learning had to be shared more widely, because I knew it could make a big impact. But there was a cost. In order to do this work justice, I had to expose my own judgmental beliefs and unconscious biases on the way. And I had to break my own beliefs about motherhood and productivity. And I tell you what, it hurt. So all this digging and looking into sociology, history, anthropology, neuroscience, science, cultural anthropology, I discovered the gender code. What's the gender code? The gender codes is a set of default beliefs we all recognise about, well, many of us recognise about the natural differences between men and women. And these beliefs create stereotypes that keep the genders firmly in different boxes, and in particular prevents women from pursuing our dreams and achieving success in life and in work. And we've all been programmed with this gender code for millennia, and it's like a societal algorithm. It's deeply embedded into our culture to the extent that we don't challenge these beliefs, even when they create real difficulties at home, at work, and in the way we contribute to society. According to the gender code, we're all pigeonholed into a box, like the blue box or the pink box. And in the pink box, typically we put women, and the label on that says carer, gatherer, supporter. And then in the blue box, we've got men, which is fixer, hunter, provider. And there's a whole set of instructions for each of the boxes, and rules and codes and all these sort of things, and we're rewarded and punished for how well we adhere to those rules and the coding. But this programming along gender lines is detrimental because it stops each and every one of us from stepping into our true potential at home, at work, and in the way we contribute to society. The thing is, we no longer need to be tied to this gender coding, outdated thinking. And how do I know that? Well, if we look far enough back into our evolutionary past, division of roles along gender lines wasn't part of our DNA. We were egalitarian people. And if you think about it, to survive in harsh environments, we needed to play to our strengths, collaborate, cooperate, support each other. And there's good evidence now to suggest, scientific evidence, that men were more involved in gathering and child rearing than we first thought, and women were also hunters, more so than we originally thought. And also, brain research, studies of emotions, and analysis of girls and boys shows us that we humans are actually more similar than different. But the thing is, the gender code is so strong, and we buy into it and we drive it personally. We don't realise that it's increasing pressure to perform and, setting these high expectations. And some of these pressures are perfectionism, imposter syndrome, mental load, busyness, hypermasculinity. And one of the ones that's had one of the greatest impacts of all is the pressure to have it all. Because for decades, many women have aspired to have it all, fulfilling career, happy family, good relationships. But the reality is, it's created either or and deep divisions: work, life, career, health, career, family. And it's left many of us thinking that we need to juggle and straddle two worlds, or come up with some balance equation, or somehow integrate everything all together. But the problem is, it's a problem, and we see it playing out every day in the lives of women like Kate. I interviewed Kate during the research process, and she is an executive in people and culture for a global organisation. And she had one daughter at the time. She's now got two. We stayed friends. And when I met her, she was really struggling. She was maintaining her high pressure role, but feeling incredibly conflicted about whether she was doing a good enough job in either. And this is what she said in her own words. So when I speak about people that I've interviewed and everything, I like to read it out in their words. And this is what she said. So as I read, just have a think about what she's saying here and see if you can identify yourself or anyone you know in this. This is what she said. Maybe I'm the worst problem in all of the people involved in my concern for whether I'm doing enough. If I felt like I'm doing enough internally, then perhaps it would be fine. The story that I'm telling myself is a problem. It's more my own perception. Deep down, I know that I'm not doing enough at work and I'm not doing enough at home because I can't possibly do it all. So we talked about this a bit more, and with Kate, she had spent so many years dedicating herself to her career. So it had become a huge part of her identity. And in that process, she knew what it took, what amount of energy and effort and attention to achieve success. And that was a lot of extra work. So time and hours. And, that was what defined her success. But then she became a parent, and she was grappling with that part of her that questioned if she could be considered successful now, because she wasn't doing as much as before, as before she was a parent. And it was just really tough for her to process that. And so here's I asked her, I said, well, tell me a little bit about, what, the ideal is for you. So what would be an ideal for any of those roles? And she said, if you ask me what makes a great executive in people and culture, the job that I do now, I guess I would paint the picture of what I used to be in terms of I would work the hours needed and I was constantly driving to innovate and change things. If you ask me what a perfect mother would look like to me, it would be one that's got a 9 to 3 job. I can still support myself in a very stress-free environment. I can drop off the kids, pick them up, do some chores, and it's really calm. So can you see what I mean now? Like, where there's this real disconnect, and she articulated it so well. It's what a lot of us struggle with, based on these expectations set by the gender code, and many other women I interviewed shared this same struggle and issues, but they didn't articulate it as well as she did. So it was a real light bulb moment, because many women struggle with, maintaining the career trajectory after they become parents. And for Kate, which I think she's the poster child for what happens, she just couldn't find a way to transition from, pre-parenting, post-parenting, and feel successful in either role. So as that story illustrates, this gender coding expectation, it leads to massive expectation gaps, self-judgment, frustration, and guilt. But what if I said that there is a way to relieve the gender code pressure, bridge the expectation gap, and navigate to a more fulfilling reality? Well, a conversation with my 10-year-old son revealed to me how. It's another story. It's about 4 o'clock after school in March 2019. And my middle son and I are surrounded by surfboards, surf accessories, and surfers. And we're in our favourite local surf shop cafe, enjoying some lovely one-on-one time, which is so rare. But despite my best intentions to draw Leo into conversation, he seemed more interested in surfing and his smoothie. So I was determined, though, not to squander this opportunity for uninterrupted time. And so I started sharing with him about my work, about the gender code, its history, its influences, and how I wanted to fix it and do something about it. But I didn't really know how or when or what back then. And he thought about it and he said to me, Mum, is your gender code anything like the coding we do in Code It Yourself Club? And that was an after-school club that does coding for kids, which he'd been doing for 3 years. And I said, I don't know, but let's investigate. So I had my dictaphone with me because I was, the tail end of the interviews. And I said, okay, Leo, so what is it about Code It Yourself Club that you love? And once again, I use his exact words because I transcribed it. He said, well, Mum, I'm usually the worker person in the family. My big brother's usually the person who bosses me around. But in coding, whatever you're coding doesn't boss you around. You get to do whatever you want with it. I'm in charge, so I can do anything I want when I make my own code. And I let it land. I was like, oh my God, right, okay, keep going. And and throughout the conversation, I've summarized it here, but this is part of what he said as we went through the process. He said, as a coder, you've got to understand how coding works and be able to read code. Before I knew how to code, though, I'd be really confused, but now I can read it. If it pops up in something somewhere, I know what to do or say because I know what it means. And then I can make a choice to do what it says or not. And I can delete what doesn't work. And all code hasn't been created yet. So you can try new things that haven't been created and create it. And I was like, I let it land for a bit and I'm like, there's a framework there. You know, I let it percolate for a bit. And that discussion and that moment, and whenever I think about it, I smile inside so much because it was so pivotal. And it was from the mouth of a 10-year-old boy, you know. And I think when I think about it, the key to understanding the gender code and how it feeds our own personal code is to be curious and open and question things. And then we understand how it works. And then we can evaluate if it makes sense anymore. And if our personal code, and if it all makes sense, then that's fine. Keep it. But if it doesn't, we can make choices. And like Leah said, we can delete parts that don't make sense anymore, that we don't want. We can, keep parts that we value and honour and we want to keep. And then we can create new code. And when we learn how to code ourselves, then we can create our own unique code. And you are in charge, just like Leo is. So how is that relevant for us here and right here, right now? Well, with everything that we do, it's really important, if you're making changes, it's really important to understand the root cause of things, like of the challenges that we're facing and how we got here and the impact it's having before we can then move on. So breaking the gender code is really the starting point. And then what it's all really about is then defining, creating and executing your own unique code for women, for men and for everyone. It's like a human strategy where you are in charge. So in the time we've got left together and beyond when I stop talking, if you want, I'd like to help you start thinking about what you might want or need to start defining your own personal code. And I've got a couple of frameworks in my book, and one in particular is called the Circle, and that's an acronym for a way to navigate and build your own code. I'd like to share 3 key things right now if you're all up for it, and you may have all covered some of these things in other things that you've done. So I just ask you to keep an open mind, take some notes, put some things in the chat, whatever you like, or maybe ask me at the end. But any sort of further clarity that you want, let me know. And I'm not going to make the assumption that no one has done anything on this. So I'm sure you have, but just keep an open mind would be great.
Yes.
And I'd love to learn what's worked well for you. So please share. So the first thing is 3 key things. So question everything. So question, that's the first one. Curiosity and question. Question like a little kid. Why? And then the second thing is acceptance. So accept, so you question everything so you know what you need to accept. And the third thing is what's most important. So 3 key things. So the first one with acceptance, question. So when I say question everything, it's a light reflection. It's not over analysis paralysis. It's a question and asking yourself some things like, what am I putting up with at the moment? What am I putting up with at the expense of myself? What are people around me putting up with? Could things be a little bit different? Am I stuck in a default way of thinking? And asking yourself questions like, why am I the glue that holds everyone together when I'm the one who's falling apart?
Yeah.
And also, why am I the one who needs to have all the answers? And in the process, I've got to bury my emotions. So there's gender coding specifics for men, women, and everyone. So it's asking those questions. So once you ask those questions, it's a little bit clearer. You can then look at acceptance. So when I trawl through all the research that I've done, all of the people that I've worked with and clients and in the corporate world throughout, my lifetime, what really stands out in terms of, a attitude or a belief system or a value that, is really key to being fulfilled and, building a strong foundation for success is acceptance. Why is that? Because people who knowledge, accept and take responsibility for their internal world and their external world at any given period of their life, they're able to achieve incredible outcomes, sustainably, and have a huge positive impact. Because by accepting, what actually is, it makes a lot of difference and taking that personal responsibility. Now, it's really important that I emphasize here that acceptance does not mean approval. And that bit there had not been obvious to me until the pandemic, because it's really tough when we're in these really stressful situations to accept it. And the last thing you want to hear someone say is, oh, just accept it, just deal with it. It feels like there's no empathy there. So when I say accept, it doesn't mean that you approve of your environment. It doesn't mean that you approve of the situation. What it does mean is that you're not going to waste energy on fighting reality and what is. And you can redirect that energy. So it's really an energy management thing, rather than a rule or you have to do. You can redirect that energy into being more clear about, what's most important, which is next, and also being resourceful. So with what you do have, and that's, gratitude comes into that as well too. But so acceptance does not mean approval, but it means you can redirect your energy to other things to navigate through. So that's the two. And then the third one is working out what's most important to you. So that's part of the three things, the core things that really matter to you. So why is that important? So I noticed with the people that I was interviewing, all the other research and reading I've done, clients, everyone I work with, that the people who seem to have a workable solution to making life work well, so they reduce the juggling, they can deal with perfectionism and imposter syndrome and the mental load. So they work out what's most important to them, and they use that as a decision-making tool. They put it at the centre of everything. So instead of fitting in what's most important to them in and around what they think they have to do or what they feel obliged to do, they put that thing at the centre and they make decisions from that place. And as an example, you might be thinking, well, how am I supposed to do that, or why should I do that? As an example, one of the women I interviewed, she's incredible, Alison. So she's a former hockey roo, so she played hockey for Australia. She's a CFO, a Telstra Businesswoman of the Year final, and she's the mother of two primary school age boys. When I spoke to her, that was. They're older now. And when she was younger, she finished up with hockey because she was injured, so she had to retire. So having this high achieving, driven personality, she went on an adventure. She travelled across 86 countries.
Whoa. By
herself, didn't go with a friend, just by herself, met people on the way, incredible stories that she has. And she recorded them all those stories in her travels in some diaries. So, and then there was which was a really great thing to do, thank goodness. And about 5 years ago, she was going through a stage where she didn't know who she was. She'd lost connection with who she was. She was working hard, raising her two boys. And, she was struggling personally and professionally. And she decided to reread her diaries. And she's like, whoa, look at me, look at what I did. And she decided she needed to tap back into that adventurous spirit to help, work out what was most important. And she said she knew what was most important all along and what she valued, but she didn't have a good structure for it that she could use. And being a finance nerd myself, I totally understand what she's talking about because she's a CFO. It's good to have a structure, certain ways of people thinking. And so she did this mental strength program. There was an online program, helped her to define and connect with what was most important to her. So, and she calls those values. And I just read this out to you too because she's an incredible person and want to get it right. So she uses these values, her top 5 values, as a compass to make decisions every day. And she also now lists her top 5 values in every diary that she gets, like at the start of the year, and every book that she buys and reads, she lists her 5 values to help her connect with them. And these are her values. So you might want to, think about if these apply to you too. So the first one is health, her own health, because she says you can't help others if you're not well yourself. Second one is family. So that's number 2. Independence, because she doesn't like working 9 to 5 and she wants flexibility. Number 4 is continual improvement. And number 5 is fun, friends and socialising. So she tries to live those out in a balanced week. So it's not a moment by moment, pass or fail. In a balanced week, she tries to live out those values. And she finds this really helpful when she's facing difficult decisions. And I must say I do too. I've implemented her strategy after speaking to her. So if there's a couple of options that are attractive to do for different reasons, then she defers to her top values. So this is what happens in her head, right? This is an example. She'll say, right, values are, I better go to the gym first before I do anything. If I can't decide, I'll run through that list and think, okay, which one's first? And she says that doesn't always win. Sometimes I go out for wine with my friends instead of going to the gym, because sometimes socialising, even though it's fifth, is more fun than the gym. But that's a process. I'm still acknowledging it while I'm checking it off in my head. So there's so many great things there. She's got a process. There's self-compassion. There's experimentation. She's sort of, not going hard on herself for not achieving it. And here's the kicker. I was floored when she told me this. Despite the fact that she played hockey for Australia, she hates exercising. Hates it. So she creates a structure to ensure that she follows through and uses her top 5 values to help. So this is an example of what she does, and this is brilliant. I have a friend who I meet to go for a run early in the morning, and we call it coffee on legs. She and I meet 3 times a week. And then I have another friend that I meet on Tuesdays, and then another one on Friday that I go for a walk with. I find that if I don't arrange to meet someone, I go back to sleep or I sit on the couch. So I know it's my weakness. So I create things around my weakness to force me to live my values.
Clever.
And I thought that was just brilliant, the way she put that, the process that she had. And so just a simple thing, in terms of process that I use with clients or, myself or my family, is to think about the 3 things that are most important to you. So it could be, big things like career, family, health, serving your community. And thinking about those 3 things, what is it about those 3 things that are really important? Is it because it gives you opportunities, because it's financial stability and opportunities? Is it about growth? Is it about connection? Is it about a feeling of accomplishment and success? Is it about care and giving? Whatever it is, drilling down to find out what those things are. And it is a process of peeling back and questioning and that sort of thing. But understanding what those key things are to you. So for me, it's connection, growth, and freedom. So I use those as an internal compass and I make decisions from there. And it honestly reduces the guilt, the perfectionism, the imposter syndrome, because I step back and think, am I living my values by the way I'm behaving now, my choices? So it's a really great tool. So where are we? Okay, good timing. So in wrapping up there, the experiences of the last 2 years have given us an opportunity to prioritise who and what is most important to us. And it's so because of that, everything that's happened and giving us that opportunity, what I propose is, rather than basing your life, your work, your relationships and your identity on outdated gender code and unrealistic expectations, yours and others, as we heard that Kate did, listen to Leo and define, create and execute your own code And you'll move from feeling invisible to being powerful. And the thing is, by breaking the gender code within us, every one of us can build the confidence in who we truly are. And we can bring the best of who we are to everything we do. And the really great thing is, by creating and executing our own code, we create the environment for the future code breakers.
Love it. That is great. Oh, I got a few goosebumps in that one. So let's open it up to, thank you so much, Danielle. That was great. My big question is, what do you, if your values are around, I mean, even if I went to Alison's values of health, family, independence, continual improvement, and fun, I guess, how do you balance all of that? How do you, I mean, if you've got 5, then how do you know what's number 1? Or do you have to then put them into their own sort of order as well? Hang on, I'm just going to make sure I can see everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's a really great thing that I loved about her process. So it wasn't set in stone. So, you know, she said, you know, health is number 1, but sometimes 5, you know, fun with friends and socializing gets bumped up the list. But it's with that though, and this is the thing that came up, not with her but with someone else. It's okay to have those you know, ordering, as long as it doesn't become a pattern, like as long as it's a one-off,
right,
rather than a pattern, because then that becomes the new normal. So, and that's up to us to decide. And then also reflecting during period, you know, maybe every I don't know, whatever works in with, maybe every quarter, every, you know, financial quarter, every end of school term, you know, reflecting on where you're at to make sure that you're living your values, and if you want to reorder them. So, yeah.
So does anyone else have any questions? I've got a couple more myself, but I don't want to hog it all. Has anyone got any questions that they would like to ask Danielle? Yes, go for it, Antonia. There you go.
Hey, thanks, Danielle. Couldn't have been better timing. Fantastic hearing you talk about the gender code and that balancing act and creating a code for ourselves. I'm really taking that in because I think during COVID and the way we do business and getting back to business and how we're balancing things, it really does come to the fore that you're trying to find that way forward. So I guess my question to you is what you're saying in the gender code, find that balance of what enriches your life and put one forward at a time that's important at that time. So assess your priorities as things come at you. Is that how you're going about it or suggesting?
Yeah, great point. And I think first, understanding, I think having that core foundation, so understanding what's at the core of you, what's the most important thing. So, and having, you know, that foundational work, and I'm sure you've done a lot of this yourself. So understanding, you know, what's really at the core. And that, for me, I use words, and Alison used values. So, you know, for me, like I mentioned, growth, connection, and freedom. For other people, it might be a sense of something. It might be, you know, they might describe it in different ways. It could be their purpose, you know, things that get them up and going. So having that foundational work done, yes. And then you mentioned about ordering them as things come at us. And absolutely, with COVID, we've had to do that because there's a lot of stuff we don't know moment to moment. And, you know, having that acceptance around what is, and then the clarity, and then having that clarity and that energy to then connect with what's most makes it a lot easier than, you know, coming up here and overanalyzing things and catastrophizing. I'm not saying that everyone does that, but that can happen. And all of that uncertainty. And that's why I talk about acceptance. For 1 minute, I don't want people to think that, you know, just roll over and die, because that's kind of conversations I've had when I've mentioned this before. It's not that. It's just, it's accepting the current context and, you know, what do I have? How can I be resourceful in this moment? I'm not for 1 minute saying that it's easy. no way. But it's just like a practice, like something like strength training or yoga or something like that. It's about building muscles in a practice. So with yoga, it's not necessarily about that hour or how long you spend in the class or online or whatever you do. It's actually building a foundation and a practice for us to be able to tap into during the day. So it's, and then same with strength training. Yes, okay, we're building our muscles, but it's actually about having functional strength to be able to, avoid falls and be able to live longer, to be able to reach to the cupboard. So what I propose with a lot of this work is building the foundations that we can then, use as a muscle throughout the day or when these big challenges come up.
It's kind of like, let's say you have a dilemma or you have to make a decision about something that obviously you're feeling a little uncomfortable about it. You have your internal list, like it's almost your personal to-do list, which is more high level, that encompasses everything. And you go to that list mentally and say, well, I can either do that or I'm going to be very uncomfortable, stressed or whatever, but is that going to, I hate to say this, feed into my higher power of where I'm going to be or what I'm going to do? And that's what you're suggesting. It sort of overrides every decision.
Absolutely. And because what happens with that as well is that that it was the best decision because it's the decision that you made. And that personal trust in yourself and to have that, we need to build our self-knowledge data bank. So knowing ourselves well and to be able to trust ourselves. And yeah, absolutely. It's, knowing, using intuition as well, I guess, tapping into that. But using, what we know about ourselves to be able to make that decision. And you mentioned about it's a tough decision. It's like building muscles. It's uncomfortable. I think, the thing about discomfort and in anything, physical, emotional, is that, it's going to hurt, but the better we get at it, it'll hurt for less. Like everyone I spoke to, and I find this myself, like people who are able to deal with that parent guilt, the mother guilt, it doesn't mean that they don't have it. They hurt, but it's just not for as long. So it's still going to be there. And I guess if we know that growth is on the other side of that discomfort, we're more likely to lean into it.
Yeah.
But when we know what's on the other side of it, then we're more likely to let other people go through it. Our kids, our colleagues, people we know and love. But if we don't practice getting, working through discomfort, we're less likely to want other people to suffer. Yes. So, yeah, I think did that answer your question or discussion? Yeah.
Yes, it certainly did. Thanks. And I'm guessing that the breakdown of how you do that is in your book. Yeah.
Yes. So I've got, so half the book is like, how did we get here, the impact and why we need to change. And then the other half is the circle framework of working.
Fantastic. I'll look forward to looking into that. That's been great. Thank you.
Mia, will you be able to, or I may already be in there, put in the link for if anyone wants to buy the book. Danielle, I've got a really curly question for you. Can I ask it? It's a bit direct, and you can, but how do we break the gender code in business? As in, what do we do if we're being mansplained to, if we feel that men are trying to block us, and almost all of us are our own business owners. So it's not bosses. So we really can tell them to get lost if we want to. But if we want to affect change, my question is, how do we break the gender code in business if men are trying to block you? And how can we change entrenched behavior?
Great question. And this is something that I'm totally committed to, because I'll just give you a little bit of background. So I, originally for years have been helping support women and men, but both, in emerging leadership and support and, executive coaching and that sort of thing. And, I wrote the book for someone I call Rebecca Fletcher. She's my avatar. So
okay. What does Rebecca do? Tell us.
So she's knocking on the door of the C-suite. So she works. She works really hard. She's got primary school age children. She's just really focused on success in her work, and also this at the same time,
massive juggle.
Present parent, yeah. And I wrote that book for her because I wanted to help her. And what I've and then programs with that as well. What I've found is that that is one part, and I don't even know the ratio of the challenge to address. So it's helping, Rebecca's and all of us understand, what the context is.
Yeah.
The other part of it is looking at the context we're within. So the actual environment. And, for me, true gender equality starts in the home or in relationships with true partnerships. So that's foundational. So that's at home, and then that extends out to community. Then we go into organisations, and I'm going to mostly talk about, corporates or larger businesses. And yes, all of our businesses, we are in charge, so we can,
but a lot of us have clients that are those big organizations, and we do have to deal with people like that.
Absolutely. So this is part of the challenge too. So creating inclusive cultures and a culture that women want to belong in, and then building male allies. So that building male allies part has been undervalued, under-resourced, and not enough attention paid to up until recently.
Right.
So, and it's systemic, it's structural, and it's individual. So the gender code is not personal, it's structural. So I just make that clear. It is based on a lifetime of training and coding and building an algorithm. So no one's necessarily there to be blamed. But once you know about it, you don't have to stay there. You can do something different. And this is, I guess, to my point about the people who do the mansplaining and the treatment. I'm going to go out on a ledge and make a massive assumption, so this doesn't apply to everyone. But their thinking is that women are supporters, men are providers.
Right.
Women are there to support. They're not consciously thinking this, but women are there to support providers in achieving success.
Right. Makes sense.
So that's how, if we can distill it all down to one thing, short description, that's what it is. So based on that, there's so many things fall out from that. So if you're not following those rules, that stereotyping and that coding, then there's something wrong. So your voice will not be heard. Okay, there's this really great book that I speak about in a manifesto about a woman scholar, Mary Beard, I think, Mary. And she looked at way back into ancient times, and it goes back way before that, but around about the time of the ancient Greeks. So I guess
there it is. Carol's got the book there.
Oh, who has?
Carol is holding it up to the screen. Mary Beard, Women and Power.
Excellent. Yes. So is that Carol, is it?
Yes.
So if I get this wrong, you can help me, Carol. So,
she's laughing.
The brilliant part of that is she said that way back then in ancient times is speaking, oratory was the most manly thing you could do. So speaking on a stage in front of people and, sharing your brilliance, that was not the realm of women. So that, if we can just sort of start from there and then draw that long bow back, that's what Mary Beard said, into the future now. So throughout the ages, women have been allowed to speak on women's issues and children, but not necessarily on politics, on history, on all those things that influence and make major decisions for our communities. So fast forward that now, and we get this situation in the boardroom, in a meeting, the Miss Triggs question, and Mary talks about that in the book too, where we've got a woman surrounded by a whole lot of men, and there's a little cartoon, and someone says in the cartoon, "That's an excellent suggestion, Miss Triggs. Maybe one of the men here would like to make it."
Yes.
Because, you know, and then we'll
Yes.
say, good, you know, then we'll really, and that's what happened. And I tend to agree with what Mary says. It's because we're not really taken seriously to speak about things other than women's issues and children and things like that, that we're not actually seeing. So it's not necessarily that, you know, we don't have a say, or they don't necessarily purposely devalue what we say, but they haven't been trained to hear the power in our voices.
So how do we train them? Like, what do we do to change this, do you think?
Great. So it's understanding the gender coding. So understanding all of this, of what's going on too. So people call it unconscious bias. I think that we need to understand more about the history. Not everyone needs to know or wants to know all that, but we need to understand how we got here.
Yeah.
So understanding that. Questioning and curiosity. And there needs to be, this is why I talk about male allies, other people in the room who are saying, well, hang on, Bob or John.
This is Mary.
Yeah, Jules just said that. It's exactly the same thing. Or making sure that everyone has a chance in a meeting to speak, that they're allowed to speak, that there are, you know, so meeting protocols, so normalize everyone having a voice in a meeting. Normalize and having structures in place to make sure everybody's voice gets heard. And I've been hearing that there's mixed challenges with that online. It should be easier, but sometimes not, with people having cameras off and that sort of thing. So the visibility can decline. But normalising everyone having a voice. There are some brilliant programs that are happening right now to create male allies, and this is really the challenge. Women still need support. We still need to understand to navigate the world that we're in right now. It's not fixing women, it's helping us navigate and get support. There's a massive support gap. Women have got to work for it and be supported, be supporters. Men typically expect it and get it, so they don't have to work for it. So still, we've got to help women. Where the focus needs to be now is male allies, and everyone understanding the context, and organisations pushing it. There's a business case now. There's just absolutely no denying the business case for more women and diversity in leadership. Study after study worldwide tells us that.
But you feel that male allies is the only way forward? You don't think that by making our voices louder as women and gathering together and supporting each other that we can break it that way?
Absolutely. So these things need to be done all together. Male allies working together, supporting each other, improving policies, improving procedures, and then working on our own mindset and approach. So they all need to be done together in conjunction.
Right.
And this is a whole great thing with how we got over 30% of women on boards in the ASX 200 without quotas. There was a whole group of people working on this from a whole lot of different areas, investor groups, chief executive women, the AICD, all sorts of areas. And they're all working together. It wasn't cohesive. It wasn't everyone, a master plan. It was everyone working together. So that power of people working together and supporting each other is the way forward for sure.
Yeah. Great. Now, does anyone else have any questions for Danielle? Mia's put a link to the book in the chat. Sorry, Mia, off you go. Shut up.
I do have a question. My question is around how do we support our youth to grow up differently and to make the change for the future? Because I've heard you raise boys. I know Jules raises boys, and I'm sure many of us, whether we're raising boys or girls, we don't want the future for our daughters and for the girls of tomorrow to be living in this same structure, you know, in this same environment. So what can we do to help them? Because I understand that obviously if we help them with some you know, some code practices, but you know, for youth, what are you doing with your children, and how do we encourage them to stand up for the change?
To make our boys into male allies, is that what you mean, Mia?
Well, yeah, to be male allies, and also to support, I guess, to support us to make that change, but then to have them to want to be that voice for change as well in the future, because, you know, we're not going to be here, you know, forever.
No. There's some really interesting research on young boys, and you realize that unconscious bias infiltrates them. They don't have it when they're younger. They think we're all equal and everything should be fair, and it happens somewhere around their sort of early teens, adolescence, something like that. But anyway, Danielle, you go.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant question, because this, like I mentioned before, it's been undervalued and under-resourced for a very long time. And it's so important because we're seeing, you know, more and more women enter STEM and, you know, the power roles, male-dominated roles. Whether they stay there or not is another point. But seeing them enter those fields, but we're not seeing the same uptake in the traditional male-dominated fields. So, you know, the caring roles, nursing, teaching, aged care, it's not at the same rate. And why? Because the boys who become men are still adhering to the gender coding, because they think many of them need to be providers. So what am I doing? So I'm involved in a program that is run by our local women's health centre, and my youngest son and I went through the pilot program. It's about it's called Raising Respectful Sons. So it's a mothers and sons program, and it is absolutely brilliant. So we did the pilot program. Maggie Dent, who's a boy expert, has endorsed it. It's got more funding now as well to go bigger, I've heard, and it is helping boys to understand, you know, about stereotypes, because why it happened is because in the Illawarra they were noticing more son to mother violence, so in teen years and beyond. So they wanted to do something about it, so they came up with this program. So it teaches, you know, we break down stereotypes. It talks about respectful language, and, you know, emotions and expression of emotions. So, you know, typically boys and men are told to shut it down, you know, like don't express your emotions, don't, you know, expose your vulnerabilities, it's a weakness. So, you know, there's that program, and I donate 10% of my books, like worldwide, every single sale I make. Not the profit, because I'm an accountant, and I know that the net profit will be a long time coming. So it's actual sales of the book to go to that program. And then as parents, I think I'm in a bit of a different situation, because there's just me, their dad, we're no longer married, and he lives overseas in China with his wife and daughter. And so they haven't all seen each other for nearly 2 years. So I'm the leader, I'm driving the bus, I'm a gender code expert, so there's not a lot of influence. I mean, my partner is great, but he's not at all the A-type masculine type of person. He's very caring. He's a great example. But the biggest thing I speak to my boys about is expressing their feelings.
Yeah.
One is a crier. He'll cry it out, and I'm like, yep, cry it out. One likes to bash on the punching bag. We've got all sorts of equipment downstairs and that, or he'll go and do something physical. And another one just talks. So I'm always like, it's okay to express your feelings, just not on each other. So
that's really good. And I think, oh, sorry, Carol, you go.
I have a son and a daughter. And so what would you recommend that a daughter also goes through that program? Because as boys acquire the sense of entitlement, it's been fascinating watching my children just grow up. My son's 30 and my daughter's about to turn 27. at the moment, she's very independent,
Mhm.
and I would cross her at your peril.
Okay.
My son is a sweetheart, and he's grown up around very strong women. But I can see that there's a need for girls to also understand, because I can see that I have older nieces, and we go from this. She went to a girls' school that went co-ed in year 10, 11, 12.
Mm.
And they have this sense of their own worth without being arrogant or pains in the ass or anything like that.
Mm.
And I can see it changing with my nieces, that once they become these women that are at home with the children, you can see it start to change. Fortunately for my nieces, they have a bossy aunt who has stressed to them the importance of maintaining their career and making sure that their partners understand the value in that.
Right.
But yeah, I do wonder that we are putting the emphasis on boys, and I totally get it, because some of my girlfriends have absolute shits for sons, and they could have done with it. But I do wonder if there's going to be a need for something with girls.
Absolutely. And there are programs for girls, and at the Laura Health Centre they do have mother and daughter programs. But you bring up a really important point, and I'm glad you said about your nieces when they're at home, because the two biggest times that the stereotypes kick in for men and women is when we couple up in heterosexual. So I'm not sure about what the studies say gay couples, but in heterosexual couples, when we partner up and cohabitate, live together, first time that they kick in, typically, not everybody, but can really kick in. And then they really ramp up when we have kids. It's just, it happens. It's one of those things that are almost like autopilot. So I love what you're saying about career. And that's exactly what I say too. I say, who you marry and having these conversations with the people that you couple with, consciously couple with them. Have the crucial conversations about what's most important to you and most important to them as a couple. And that will be around career, around kids, around health, about, mobility in terms of
superannuation.
We know the gap, the superannuation gap. It can be, men can sometimes retire with up to 47% more than women, or women 47% less than men, let's say that way, sorry. And then the lifetime earnings gap can be as much as $2 million. So caring is important, and everyone will do it differently, and everyone based on what's most important to them. Exactly right. I say have those conscious, crucial conversations with your partner, and then keep the career fire burning. Yeah. I can't emphasize that enough. And you need to know what's most important to you. It's going to ebb and flow and change along the way. Sometimes the fire, sometimes it's going to be a flicker, and that's okay. Sometimes it's going to be a raging furnace. But keeping it going is so important. So, if we're on mat leave, parental leave, if we're, doing something else, keeping connected with your career, just keeping that flicker or that flame, and knowing when to turn it up and down is based on, you yourself, and also and I think also the other important thing is to have a reverse career planning approach. So work out where you might, not specifically, but where you want to kind of end up, and then work backwards, and then all the way along, when to turn it up and down.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, go, Antonia.
Go,
I'm
Antonia.
sorry. I'm going to have to end this within the next 5 minutes, though, because I've got another meeting that'll come into this room.
Oh,
Right.
it's a really quick question. I do have a book that I'm writing for an illustrated book for kids. It's called Suddenly Susan is Different. And it's at that age when children are running across the fields and some boy or girl turns around and says, "You run like a girl." And it's that point where Jules, you're talking about, where kids suddenly see difference.
Yes.
And I'd really love to talk to you, Danielle, about how I can't figure out how she goes to her older sister and she says, what's going on? And the older sister imparts this wisdom of something like the genetic code you're talking about there. And I need that ending, that advice, that moral. If I can talk to you about it, I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's arrange a time and we'll have a little chat. More than happy to.
Thank you.
Yes, and Danielle, Danielle and I are putting together a program for corporates. Oh, I think we lost it. No, we haven't.
Okay.
So Antonia and Mia, she's part of our crew as well. And
yes.
But thank you so much also to Carol and Michelle who have arrived. I could actually keep talking about this forever. I've got about 5 more questions that I've written down, but I've run out of time.
Can I just quickly check, Danielle, are you okay if I put your email address in the chat box, or would you like me to send Antonia an email to you guys?
I've already got it from the lunch in Balmain.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Yeah. But you can put as
Perfect.
well, if anyone else wants to contact me, that's totally fine. Yep.
Okay.
Fantastic. And we'll tell everyone about your book and maybe just post something about your amazing course into the She's the Boss group on Facebook.
Yes.
Because I'd say there might be some, there are obviously women who have lots of connections with corporates as well. So you can never know. But I really
thank you so
appreciate
much
you
for doing all you're doing.
Yeah. Everything that you're doing. So
I've loved it. It's been awesome. Right up my alley.
Fantastic.
Oh,
and there you go.
thank you.
Michelle says, thanks, great session as well. So thank you so much, Danielle, for sparing the time today. And, you know, especially with all the technical issues and everything, you did a brilliant job. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's been